The heater in my truck had one setting that worked, which was too hot, and I'd been running it that way for an hour because the alternative was worse. Outside it was 22 degrees and dropping, the kind of cold the desert doesn't get but a handful of nights a year, and I had the window cracked an inch just to keep from sweating through my jacket. Route 79 ran north out of Tucson dead straight, no curve to it at all, like somebody had laid a string across the state and paved along the line. No towns for 45 miles either direction. No light either, not from a house, not from a tower, not from anything. Just my headlights and the strip of asphalt they lit up, and the black on both sides of it that started at the shoulder and didn't stop. I'd spent 3 days at my uncle's place outside Marana, and it had gone the way it always goes. Fine at first and then not fine. Old ground getting dug up again. The loan he'd given me 2 years back coming up in a way that wasn't really about the money. We'd sat at his kitchen table after dinner not talking, both of us looking at our plates, and I'd gotten up, said I should get going, and left without much more than that. No real goodbye. I didn't feel bad about it driving away, and I still didn't feel bad about it now. An hour up the road, just tired from being around family too long. Mostly I was glad to be moving. I wasn't thinking about much of anything, which was the point. The radio was on low, a country station out of Tucson that had been losing its grip on the signal for the last 20 miles, cutting through clean for a few bars and then dissolving into hiss before it found itself again. I reached over and turned the volume up a notch, like that would help, like the problem was the truck's speakers, and not 45 miles of empty desert between me and the tower. It didn't help. I left it there anyway, some singer's voice ducking in and out under the road noise, and my coffee sat cold in the cup holder, untouched for the last hour, a film starting to skin over on top of it. There was a Peterbilt running about a quarter mile ahead of me, its taillights 2 small red points hanging in all that black, and I'd been using it as something to aim at more than anything. A fixed point on a road that didn't give you one otherwise. Then the taillights bloomed, both of them, all at once, hard red, and I knew before I could think it that the truck had locked its brakes. I came off the gas and my hands did the rest before I told them to. I hauled the wheel left, felt the tires catch the shoulder, gravel screaming up under the wheel wells loud enough to hear over the engine, the whole truck shuddering as it bled speed. My headlights swung with the turn, and in that swing they caught the road ahead, the reason the semi had stood on its brakes in the middle of an empty highway at 1:45 in the morning. A coyote lying across the center line. Full grown, lying flat and lengthwise right along the stripe, like it had been laid down there and not like it had died there. No blood on the asphalt. No mark on it that I could see in the half-second my lights were on it. No skid marks either. None of the black rubber scarring you'd expect if the semi's tires had come anywhere close to it. It was just there, straight along the yellow line, its legs tucked in close to its body. I steered around it and felt the truck settle back onto the asphalt, and I didn't look at it again, not directly, though I caught the shape of it going past in the corner of my eye and didn't like how still it was. The semi's brake lights dropped back to their steady red glow and it started rolling again, slow at first and then picking speed, and I fell in behind it. Third now in a short line of taillights I hadn't noticed forming behind me, headlights I hadn't noticed behind those. I told myself it had frozen. I didn't believe it. Not all the way. But I didn't stop. There wasn't another car to ask, and no shoulder wide enough to sit on and think it over, so I kept my foot steady and my eyes on the road and let it go. The radio faded out again somewhere behind that, the singer's voice thinning into static, and this time it didn't come back. I reached over once, out of habit, and turned the dial a hair, and got nothing on either side of where the station used to sit, just a flat gray hiss that matched the flat gray dark on both sides of the truck. I left it on. Somehow the noise was better than nothing. Third car in a line I couldn't see the end of. The Coyote already a half-mile behind me and getting farther, small in my mirrors, then gone. 2 miles up the road, the semi's brake lights came on again, and this time there was nothing gradual about it. No easing, no drift toward the shoulder. It just stopped, the way a machine stops when you cut the power to it. And I had half a second to register that before the headlights went with it. Then the running lights along the top of the cab. Then all of it, the whole rig going black at once, like something had reached in and closed a fist around it. I stood on the brakes and stopped a truck length behind the trailer, and in my mirrors, the pickup that had been running behind me stopped too, close enough that I could see the driver's silhouette jerk forward against the belt. Past him, more lights were coming up out of the dark and slowing, one after another, red blooming across 300 yards of empty highway until I'd counted 8 of us total, strung out like something had reeled us in and left us there. I picked up my phone off the seat. No bars, not one. I'd known this stretch dropped signal. Everybody who drove this road at night knew it. The dead patch between Picacho Peak and the edge of Florence. But knowing it and needing it were 2 different things. I tried the radio anyway, worked the dial from one end to the other, and got nothing the whole way across. Not even the ghost of a station fading in and out like before. Just flat gray hiss, the same on every frequency, like the air itself had gone quiet. I put the truck in park and got out. The cold hit different standing still than it had through a cracked window, and I zipped my jacket to the throat, walking up along the shoulder toward the trailer, gravel crunching under my boots the only sound there was. The Peterbilt sat dead ahead of me, huge and black and not running, and I came up along the driver's side and put my hand on the door handle expecting it to be locked. It wasn't. It swung open easy, no resistance, and I climbed the step and shined my phone's flashlight into the cab. Empty. Seat empty, floor empty, nothing on the passenger side but a clipboard and a paper bag gone soft with grease stains. I checked the sleeper behind the seats too, pushed the curtain back and shined the light in, and there was nobody in there either. Just a rolled sleeping bag and a duffel and a half-eaten sandwich sitting on the dash where somebody had set it down mid-bite and not come back for it. The CB handset hung off its cord below the radio, swaying slightly from when I'd climbed up. I picked it up and keyed it and got nothing back, not even static, just a dead weight of plastic in my hand. I climbed back down and stood on the running board a second, then dropped to the asphalt. And on the way past the exhaust stack, I reached out without really thinking about it and touched the metal. It was cold. Not warm the way an engine that's been running for an hour should be warm, not cooling down warm with that faint tick you get as metal contracts. Cold. Flat cold, the same temperature as the air around it, like the truck had been sitting there dead for half the night. I'd watched its brake lights flare 2 minutes ago. I stood there with my hand still on the stack, telling myself I was wrong about the time, that it had been longer than it felt, and knowing I wasn't wrong. I stepped back onto the shoulder and looked north. The road ran the same as it always ran here, dead straight, no curve, no rise, and it was just as dark up that direction as it was behind me. Nothing moving on it. Nothing to see at all past the reach of my own headlights. I walked back down the line. 2 cars behind mine sat a sedan with its window cracked an inch, and the woman inside leaned toward the gap when she saw me coming. She had a nice coat on, dark wool. "What's happening up there?" she said. Semi's stopped. Driver's gone. Not pulled over. Gone. I didn't know a better way to say it than flat like that. She sat with it a second. "I don't have a signal either," she said. "Should we turn around?" "I don't know yet," I told her and kept walking because I didn't, and because standing there wasn't going to make me know it any faster. 2 vehicles past her was a flatbed, and the man driving it was already out of the cab by the time I reached him. A big guy, heavy set through the shoulders, wearing a tan Carhartt jacket. He had his arms crossed against the cold, and he wasn't looking at me so much as looking past me, back down the road behind us. "Something was moving along the shoulder," he said, before I'd even asked. "Before the truck stopped. Right side. low, keeping pace with us. I lost it when the lights shifted. He stopped there, jaw working, like he had more and had decided against it. What was it? Too big for a dog. He shook his head once, short. Moved wrong. I'm not saying more than that. I waited to see if he would anyway. He didn't. He just uncrossed his arms and put his hands in his jacket pockets and looked back down the dark behind the flatbed like the answer might come walking up out of it. The minivan was next, and whoever was inside had the doors locked and the window down maybe an inch, not more. I could see shapes moving in there. A woman's shoulder, the pale ovals of kids' faces low in the back seats. I knocked on the glass and the man in the driver's seat looked at me and mouthed something through the gap I couldn't hear, then held up his phone, screened toward me, no bars showing, and shook his head. I nodded and moved on. At the very back of the line sat a white hatchback, and the man standing beside it already had his door open and one boot up on the frame like he was fixing to leave. Late 50s, ball cap, his jaw already set before I opened my mouth. I am not sitting in the cold on a highway for an hour waiting for a tow, he said loud before I'd said a word. This is a stalled truck. That is all this is. Semi's engine's cold, I said. Cab's empty. Driver never came out. I'd have seen him. That is the craziest thing I have ever heard, he said, not even breaking stride on it, already looking north up the road past his own hatchback like he was measuring the distance in his head. I didn't push it. His weight was already shifted forward onto the balls of his feet. I walked back to my truck alone and got in and pulled the door shut, and the cold followed me in with it, sitting in the seams of the seat, in the wheel under my hands. I reached up and killed the dome light before I'd thought about why. With it off, the desert came up around the truck the way it always did out here, but heavier now, more complete. No structures anywhere. No rise of hill to break the flat of it. No glow off a town too far to see, but close enough to smudge the sky. Just black pushing in against the edges of my headlight beam, the scrub close along both shoulders, maybe 15 feet off the asphalt on either side. Close enough that I could make out the shapes of it if I let my eyes adjust, and past that shape, nothing. No bottom to it at all. I sat there with my hands on the wheel, engine idling, 8 sets of taillights strung out behind me on a road that didn't go anywhere I could reach. And I looked out at that dark and didn't like how long I could look into it without finding a single thing to stop my eye. I sat there a while with my hands on the wheel, not doing anything, just letting my eyes drift out across the shoulder and back, out and back, and it was in one of those passes over the mirror that I caught it. 50 yards behind the hatchback, lying flat across the center line the same way the first one had, was another coyote. Same size, same posture, legs straight, body parallel to the lane markers, not a mark on it that I could see from that distance, not even the slump a dead animal gets when it's been lying somewhere a while. I sat forward and looked at it directly instead of through the mirror, and it didn't change anything about what I was seeing. It hadn't been there when I walked back to talk to the man in the ball cap. I'd have seen it. I'd walked that whole stretch of shoulder not 15 minutes ago, and there had been nothing on the road behind his car but empty asphalt running off into the dark. Now there was a second dead animal lying in the exact place the first one had been, 40 yards up from the driver we hadn't seen anywhere on this road either. One in front of the line, one behind it now. 8 vehicles boxed between 2 identical animals laid out like they'd been set down with a level, and both directions past them running off dark and empty as far as my headlights reached. Something had put it there, while I was standing at that hatchback talking, while the rest of us sat here with our engines idling and our eyes on the dead truck up front, telling ourselves a story about a stalled rig and a driver relieving himself somewhere off the shoulder. I didn't sit with it long. I got out and walked back fast, not running, but close to it, boots loud on the gravel, and the man was still there, still standing by his open door with the flashlight already up in his hand, like he'd been waiting on me to leave so he could go. "There's another one," I said, "behind your car. 50 yards back, same as the one up front. It wasn't there when I walked past you 10 minutes ago. Something put it there while we were all sitting in our cars." He looked at me for a second. Just looked, the flashlight beam wobbling a little where it pointed at the ground between us. "That is the craziest thing I have ever heard," he said. "Driver probably walked off to take a leak. I'm walking south. I'm stepping past that thing and I'm flagging down the first car I see, because I am not freezing to death out here waiting on somebody to explain any of this to me." "The driver isn't taking a leak." I said it flat, no room in it. "The engine's cold, not cooling down. Cold like it's been sitting there for hours. He's gone, and something placed that animal while we were sitting here. Do not walk past it." He didn't answer that. He clicked the flashlight on, full beam now, and turned and started walking south along the shoulder, boots crunching, the light swinging a little with each step. I went back to my truck. I don't know why I didn't go after him. I got in and shut the door and watched him through the windshield instead. The beam of his flashlight bobbing away from us down the shoulder, 40 yards, maybe a little more, cutting a small moving circle of light across the gravel and the dark scrub beside it. Then it dropped. It hit the asphalt and bounced once, twice. I heard both of those, clean and small in the frozen air. And then it went dark. He didn't cry out. There wasn't a sound from that direction at all. No scuff, no gravel, nothing. The night just closed back up over the spot the same as it had been before he ever started walking. Behind me, the minivan started screaming. The woman first, one long unbroken note of it, and then the kids joined in under her, high and ragged. And I heard a door somewhere down the line, Randy's, the flatbed, swing open. I looked in the mirror and saw him standing outside his cab, looking south past me toward where the light had gone out, standing there long enough that I thought he might actually go see. Then he didn't. He got back in and I heard the locks go, that flat electronic clunk of it traveling clean across the empty road. And a second later the minivan's locks answered it, click, 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 4 doors at once. I sat with my hands on the wheel and my eyes on that dark stretch of shoulder where the flashlight had bounced twice and gone out, and the minivan went quiet behind me, and Randy's flatbed went dark, and nothing at all moved on that road but the cold coming up off the asphalt in a thin, visible shiver under my headlights. I kept my eyes on the spot where the flashlight had gone dark, and after a while, I don't know how long, 10 seconds, 30, something in that dark moved. It came low, close to the ground, the way nothing that size should move. I want to say it crawled, but crawling is a word for things I understand. Dogs and babies and men on their bellies through mud. And this was not that. Its front end reached forward and its back end came up too high behind it, and the whole thing seemed to fold in the middle when it needed to, in a place a spine has no business folding. It was pale, paler than skin has any right to be at night, pale like something that has never once been out in the sun. It had Nick. It was pulling him by the leg, or what I took for the leg, off the shoulder and into the black wall of scrub, and it did this without a single sound. No drag of cloth on gravel, no grunt, no branch snap, nothing. 3 seconds, maybe 4, and the brush closed over both of them like water closing over a stone. I did not open my door. I want that on the record, whatever record there ends up being. I sat there with my hands on the wheel and the engine idling under me, and I did not go out to see if there was anything left to help. 4 minutes went by that felt like 40. I know it was 4 because I watched the clock on the dash do it, the little green numbers ticking over one at a time, and each one felt like its own separate decision I had to survive. The minivan behind me had gone quiet somewhere in there. No more crying, no more that one long note from the mother. just nothing, which was worse. Randy's flatbed was dark. He'd killed his headlights and his running lights both, like a man closing his eyes so a nightmare can't see him back. I was trying to put shape to what I'd just watched. The wrongness of the limbs, how there'd been too many places for them to bend, how it had not made a sound dragging a full-grown man 20 feet through gravel, when the glass went up ahead of me. It wasn't a crack. It was a shatter, all at once. The kind of sound a window makes when something goes through it rather than something hitting it. Julie's passenger window. I heard it, and then I heard her. One scream, sharp, cut clean in half like somebody had reached out and turned a dial to 0. Her sedan rocked on its springs, once, twice, and then it sat still, the way a boat sits still after the wake's already passed under it. I didn't move. I have gone back over that moment more times than I want to admit, asking myself what I should have done, and I still don't have an answer that isn't kill your lights and pray or get out and run, and neither one of those is help. Something crossed in front of my headlights. It was low to the ground, pale the same way, hairless or near enough to it, and it came from the front this time, moving right to left across the cone of my own light, like it owned the road it was walking on. It was built about the size of a big dog, but the legs were wrong, too long for the body, bending in more places than legs are supposed to bend, and it moved with a crawling, pouring motion that wasn't 4 legs walking and wasn't a man crawling either. It was its own thing. Nothing I've ever seen move that way. And then it stopped. Right there in my light, for 1 full second, it turned its head and looked straight into my headlights, straight at me sitting behind them, and I saw its face. I have tried since to describe that face to people who weren't there, and I always fail, because the words I reach for are animal words or human words, and the thing did not have either kind of face. It had the suggestion of both. It had something like a jaw and something like eyes, set wrong, spaced wrong, and for that 1 second it looked exactly like it was deciding something about me, weighing me the way you'd weigh a piece of fruit in your hand. Then it dropped its head and it was gone, off the left shoulder, swallowed into the dark, same as the first one. I sat there and understood something all at once. The way you understand a fall is happening only after you're already in the air. There were 2 of them at least, and they were working the line from both ends toward the middle. The one that took Nick had come up from the back. This one had come down from the front. Between them, they'd taken the driver of that dead semi, they'd taken Nick, they'd taken Julie. Randy was 1 car ahead of me. I was next in whatever order they were keeping. That was when Randy's horn went off. It came up out of nowhere, a long, flat, continuous blast that filled the whole dead stretch of highway, a man leaning his whole forearm on the wheel because it was the only thing he had left that made noise. It ran maybe 4 seconds. Then it cut off. Not tapered, not choked down slow. Cut, mid-note, the way a radio dies when you pull the plug straight out of the wall. After that, there was nothing behind it. No horn, no voice, no door. The minivan stayed dark and silent behind me, and I didn't know anymore if that family was hiding on the floor of it, or if they were already gone the same way as the rest. And I had no way to find out that didn't mean opening my own door and stepping out onto that road. I sat there with my hands on the wheel and the engine running under me, the only light left burning on that whole stretch of Route 79, and I understood, with a stillness that scared me worse than the screaming had, that I was the only one left, and that I was next. The impact came before the sound of it, a weight dropping onto the roof so hard the headliner bowed down above my head like a sheet pulled taut and let go. Not a branch off the culvert bank. Not anything blown loose by the wind. Something with mass, something that landed and stayed. I felt it settle. Then I felt it start to move, slow, deliberate, shifting forward across the roof toward the windshield, the metal ticking and flexing under it with each small adjustment. and my foot came down on the gas before my brain had finished telling it to. The truck lurched. I swung left around Julie's sedan without meaning to steer at all. Just some animal correction that put distance between me and whatever was 2 feet above my skull, and the tires bit into gravel on the left shoulder and held. The weight didn't fall. It shifted with the truck, compensating, riding the roof the way a man rides a rearing horse. I didn't see the semi's rear corner coming. I felt it. A slam of metal on metal that threw the wheel out of my hands and swung the tail of the truck hard right. And the world went sideways. The shoulder disappeared. The truck dropped into the culvert nose first and rolled, one full turn, and came down on the passenger side with a sound like the whole vehicle folding in on itself. And then it was still, and I was hanging in my seatbelt with the driver's door underneath me and 3 inches of half-frozen water soaking up through the seam of it. The engine had died on impact. The headlights hadn't. They burned sideways into the dirt wall of the culvert, lighting nothing I needed lit. I ran the inventory before I let myself feel anything. Legs, they moved. Arms, they moved. Nothing pinned, nothing bent wrong. No place on my body screaming louder than the rest of it. I found the buckle with numb fingers and released it and dropped the 2 feet onto the door beneath me, and that was when I heard the scraping start above. It was slow, almost lazy. Claws working across the undercarriage and the frame rails, no hurry in it at all, moving from the rear of the truck toward where the windshield would be. And I understood it was tracking the shape of the vehicle in the dark the way a man runs his hand along a wall to find a door. A hand came down flat against the driver's side window, right above my face. There were too many fingers, and they moved like they had all the time they needed, spreading slow across the glass, feeling the cold surface of it the way you'd read a note in the dark. I didn't touch that window. It was inches from my head, and the thing on the other side of it was inches from my head, and I was not going to put my fist through glass with that hand still learning the shape of it. The windshield in front of me had gone in the roll, a long crack running the whole width of it on a diagonal, catching what little light there was. I pulled my knees up to my chest, planted both boots flat against it, and kicked. The crack widened. I kicked again, and the whole sheet popped clean out of the frame and dropped away into the frozen mud below, and cold air came pouring in through the gap like the desert had been waiting outside the door the whole time. I grabbed the glove box on the way past. Phone, 1 road flare, both by feel, both by the kind of reflex that doesn't ask permission. And I went through the opening on my elbows, dragging myself over broken glass and bent frame, and landed face first in mud that had frozen at the edges and stayed soft underneath, cold enough to burn. Behind me the window went. I heard the whole pane give at once, not cracking, just gone, glass raining down into the cab I'd just left, and I didn't turn around to see the hand that had finally decided to stop feeling for a way in. I ran. North, along the bottom of the culvert, keeping my head below the level of the road so the embankment stood between me and the highway like a low wall, and somewhere in that first stretch of running I got the flare lit without slowing down. Some part of me that had done this before at a campsite doing the work, while the rest of me just kept moving my legs. The flare caught and the culvert went red, red on the frozen mud, red climbing the dirt banks on either side, and behind me the scraping stopped. Not slowed. Stopped all at once, like a hand pulled back from a stove. I turned around with the flare held out in front of me like I could keep the whole night at arm's length with it. The truck sat wrecked and exposed at the bottom of the culvert, its underside turned up toward the sky, and on it, crouched along the frame where the windshield had been, was the pale shape, low and folded in on itself in a way that made my eyes want to slide off it rather than look straight on. When the flare light hit it full, it recoiled. Its whole body drew back at once, a flinch that ran through it like current, and then it was moving again, fast this time, dropping off the far side of the truck and back up toward the road, and it did not come down into the culvert after me. It did not come into the light. I stood there with my chest heaving and the flare hissing red in my fist, and understood something that felt less like a thought than a fact handed to me. It wasn't the truck that had kept it off. It was the light. That was the whole reason I was still standing in 3 inches of freezing water instead of being dragged the way Nick had been. Something rolled against my boot in the water. I looked down and found a second flare, unlit, half buried in the frozen mud at the bottom of the culvert. And when I picked it up and turned it toward the light, I could read Randy's name written on the side in thick black marker, the kind of thing a trucker writes on his own gear so it doesn't walk off at a truck stop. And I understood that the light was the only thing keeping me alive. I climbed out of the culvert a quarter mile up from where the truck lay on its side, keeping the flare out in front of me the whole way, and I did not look south toward the line of stopped cars. I did not look at the semi. I got up onto the shoulder and then onto the road itself, and I started north, walking first and then running. The flare held out ahead of me the way you'd hold a lit torch through a cave. The first flare burned for about 22 minutes. I know because I watched it the whole time. Watched the red cherry at the tip. Watched for any dimming, terrified of the moment it would start to go. When it finally sputtered, I didn't stop running. I brought Randy's flare up against the dying one and lit it off the flame, my hands shaking too hard to line them upright, and I dropped the dead one behind me without looking back to see where it landed. After that, there was nothing but the road and the cold and the sound of my own boots. The desert on both sides was flat and black in every direction. No fence line, no ridge, nothing to tell me how far I'd come or how far there was left to go. My hands went numb somewhere in there. My face went numb after that. I kept the flare arm extended because that arm mattered more than the rest of me, and I ran with my head down and my breath tearing in and out of my chest in a rhythm that had stopped being about oxygen a long time ago. I ran for what felt like a long time. I didn't have a way to check it exactly. My phone was in my jacket, and I wasn't stopping to look at anything. But somewhere close to 90 minutes must have gone by. The cold had changed character, gotten meaner, down around 18 degrees by then. My hands were not really hands anymore. My face was not really a face. I was a body moving a light down a straight road. Randy's flare started to sputter. I saw the light dim before I let myself understand what that meant, and something in my chest dropped the way it drops when you're driving, and the gas light comes on 40 miles from anywhere. Then I saw headlights. They came up out of the black to the north, a single pair, low and steady, moving toward me on my side of the road. I stopped running and stood in the center of the lane with the flare held straight up over my head, because I didn't have it in me to wave it or shout, only to stand there and hold the light up and hope. The vehicle slowed a long way out. It rolled to a stop maybe 20 feet from me, and I saw the light bar on the roof and the county shield on the door before the driver ever got out, and something in my legs finally let go. Some tension I hadn't known I was holding since the truck went over. The deputy came around the front of his truck with his own flashlight up. He found me standing on the center line of Route 79 with a flare that had just gone dead in my fist. The last of its light had faded out somewhere in the final 100 yards, so that by the time he reached me, I was standing in the dark holding nothing but a burnt-out stick. "A northbound driver came through about an hour ago," he said. His voice was even, unhurried, like he was reading it off a form. "Passed a line of stopped vehicles south of here. Got signal near the Florence city limits and called it in." He looked at me for a second, taking in whatever I looked like standing there. I didn't know. I couldn't feel my own face to guess. "You're the one from the stopped vehicles?" "Yes," I said. It came out smaller than I meant it to. He didn't ask anything else out there in the cold. He got a hand under my arm and walked me to the passenger side of his truck and put me inside, and the heat hit me like walking into a wall, and my whole body started shaking in a way it hadn't while I was running. He got in on his side and pulled the door shut, and just sat there a moment with the engine idling, letting the heat build, and then he looked over at me and waited. I told him about the Coyote on the center line, lying too straight, no blood on it. I told him about the semi going dark and the cab being empty and the engine cold on the exhaust stack when it should have been ticking down from heat. Cold like it had been sitting there for hours instead of running 2 minutes before. I told him about Nick walking south with his flashlight and the flashlight dropping and bouncing twice on the road and going dark and no sound after it, no sound at all. I told him what came out of the brush and dragged him off the shoulder, low and pale and built wrong, too many joints and limbs that were too long. I told him about the shape that crossed my headlights afterward and turned its face into the light and looked at me for 1 full second, and about the hand that pressed flat against the window glass above my head while I hung sideways in my own seatbelt, the fingers spreading slow like it was reading the surface of the glass. I told him about the flare, and how the light had turned it back, how it had flinched off the truck and wouldn't come down into the culvert after me. He listened to all of it without his face changing once. Not disbelief, not belief, nothing I could read at all. When I ran out of words, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "We'll go back at first light." No question about any of it, no argument, nothing. I sat there in the heated cab with the dead flare still in my hand, the plastic of it gone cold and stiff, and I had no way to make him understand what I had just come out of, no way even to make myself understand it. Light came up gray over the desert, the kind of gray that doesn't so much arrive as get admitted, a little more of it every minute until you realize you can see the dash clock again. Calhoun hadn't said much in the hours between. He'd given me a blanket out of a duffel behind his seat and turned the heat up 2 notches and let me sit there with my hands wrapped around a thermos cup of coffee I didn't drink. And when the sky started to lighten, he put the truck in gear and pulled back onto 79 heading south. I watched the mile markers go by and didn't say anything, and he didn't ask me to. We saw it from a 1/4 mile out. 8 shapes strung along the shoulder and the lane, dark against the pale road, exactly where I'd left them. My stomach did something slow and cold when I understood they hadn't moved. None of them. Not one car pulled forward or turned around or driven off in the night. They were just sitting there in the flat gray light the way I'd left them, and for 1 stupid half-second I let myself think that meant everyone was still inside, waiting on us, cold and scared, but there. They weren't there. As we got close enough to see clearly, I understood that. Every window on every vehicle was gone. Not cracked, not spider-webbed the way glass goes when a rock kicks up off the road. Gone, punched inward. Glass scattered across the seats and the dash and pooled on the asphalt below the doors like something had been thrown through it from outside with enough force that it didn't matter what got broken in the process. The minivan's sliding door hung open at an angle no hinge should allow, bent back nearly flat against the side panel. Randy's flatbed had lost its driver's door entirely. It lay in the ditch grass 10 feet off, the metal folded the wrong direction, torn where the hinge pins should have held it. Julie's sedan sat with both front doors open like wings. Calhoun slowed the truck to a crawl and then stopped it in the northbound lane and got out. I sat there a second before I made myself follow him. The semi was still where I'd left it too, dead and dark, cab door hanging open the way I'd left it. My truck was still down in the culvert on its side, headlights burning uselessly into the dirt bank, the windshield gone from the frame just like I remembered kicking it out. Everything matched what I'd told him in the cab of his truck, every piece of it. I walked along the line behind him at a distance, not wanting to get close to any of the cars, and every one of them was the same. Empty. Hollow the way a shell is hollow. No blood that I could see, no scraps of clothing, no bags left open on seats where someone had grabbed for something and missed. Just broken glass and bent metal and doors standing open onto nothing. The Coyotes hadn't moved either. The first one lay exactly where it had stopped the semi, flat and straight on the center line, its legs together, no mark on it that I could see even now in better light. The second one lay 50 yards past Nick's hatchback in the same posture, same stillness, laid out like something on a table waiting to be looked at. Nobody had dragged them off. Nobody had touched them at all. Calhoun walked the length of the line with his phone held up, taking pictures of each vehicle in turn, working his way down it car by car. He didn't say anything about what he was seeing. He didn't ask me if this matched what I'd described. He got to the second coyote, crouched by it a moment, took 2 pictures of it from different angles, and stood back up. Then he keyed the radio mounted on his shoulder and gave a string of numbers and a location I didn't fully follow, and asked for another unit and someone from the county to come out and look at 8 vehicles on 79, no occupants located. He clipped the radio back and looked at me for the first time since we'd gotten out of the truck. "I'm going to take you somewhere warm," he said. That was all. No question about what I'd seen, nothing that asked me to make it make sense for him. I don't know if that was mercy or just the limit of what his job required of him right then. I didn't ask. He drove me into Florence with the heater running and pulled into the lot of a 2-story motel on Main Street with a sign that said Rancho Grande in tall letters that had probably been read before the sun got at them. He went in and talked to somebody at a desk while I sat in the truck, and came back out with a key card and walked me up an outside staircase to a room on the 2nd floor. "Stay put," he said, standing in the doorway with his hand still on the frame. "Someone will come by in the morning and take a statement, a full one." I said okay. It was already morning. He didn't correct me, and I understood he meant a later one with a form and a recorder, and I said okay again, and he left. I didn't shower. I didn't look for food, though there was a vending machine humming somewhere down the walkway I'd passed on the way in. I sat on the edge of the bed with every light in the room turned on, the overhead and the lamp by the nightstand, and the one over the little sink by the bathroom door. And I sat there for a long time not doing anything at all. At some point before it got fully light, I lay back on top of the covers without taking my boots off. I left the lights burning. The window faced west, over the parking lot toward the scrub and the flat nothing beyond it, and there was a light on a pole near the lot entrance, one of those orange sodium lamps, and it was failing, cycling bright, then dim, then almost dark, on no rhythm I could find. I watched it because I couldn't make myself stop watching it. When the light was up, I could see the edge of the lot clearly, the gravel and the low brush past it, and there was nothing there, nothing I could put a name to. But when the light dipped, even for half a second, I was sure, certain, that something crouched low at the tree line, still, waiting, exactly where the light had just shown me empty ground. I don't know if it was there. I don't know if 3 days of driving and a night in a frozen culvert and everything I'd watched happen to 8 strangers had started building things out of shadows that weren't asking to be built. I watched the light go up and down, and I never once caught the shape moving in the bright, and I never once failed to see it in the dark. I kept watching until I couldn't hold my eyes open anymore, and somewhere past that point I stopped watching without deciding to. I don't know if it moved in that last second before I went. I don't know if it was ever there at all. The lights stayed on, my boots stayed tied,